Membership keeps public broadcasting free for everyone, with help from...
How can you lift your customers up if your business network keeps going down? Be there for the people who need you most on SDN's reliable broadband network for business. SDN Communications. Enjoy the uptime.
The Bush Foundation, investing in great ideas and the people who power them in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations that share the same geography. Learn more at bushfoundation.org. Community Healthcare Association of the Dakotas. For those in need of health insurance, healthcare.gov has added options. Those who may not have qualified previously may now find health coverage. Live answers available by dialing 211.
This is a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Hello and welcome to SDPB's 2022 gubernatorial debate. I'm Jackie Hendry, tonight's moderator. We're broadcasting from the Leo P. Flynn Gallery in SDPB's Sioux Falls studio. And tonight, I'm joined by Democratic candidate, State Representative Jamie Smith. Representative, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And Libertarian candidate, Tracy Quint. Ms. Quint, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Republican incumbent Governor Kristi Noem declined our invitation to participate in tonight's debate. A review of the rules. Each question is allowed a 90-second answer, a 60-second rebuttal from the other candidate, and a 30-second follow-up as needed. The questions were curated by SDPB journalists, and some have been submitted by our studio audience. We've allowed 1 minute for opening statements and 2 minutes for closing statements. We drew the order for opening statements before tonight's broadcast, and Tracy Quint drew first. Tracy Quint, your 1 minute opening statement starts now.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank South Dakota Public Broadcasting for having this debate, and I want to thank the voters of South Dakota for allowing me to be a part of this election. In introducing myself, I want to maybe address one of the elephants in the room. I'm not a politician. I'm not 100% polished like some of my competitors, but I felt it was important to have a normal South Dakotan be part of this election. I love my state, and I love the freedoms of the state of South Dakota. And I wanted to make sure our state stays amazing and that we continue to enjoy the freedoms that we hold dear in our state. On that note, I'm honored to be here and I look forward to discussing the issues tonight, and I look forward to a great debate with my competitor, Jamie Smith.
Thank you, Tracy Quint. Representative Smith, 1 minute starts now.
Thank you. And again, thanks for having us. And thank you for all the people at home that are tuning in here tonight. Thank you for being here. Another elephant in the room, the fact that our governor is not here. The governor has chosen not to be with you here today, and she's chosen that for a very specific reason, because she doesn't want to have to answer to the lies that she's been spreading throughout this whole campaign cycle. She doesn't want to have to answer to the fact that she's been found guilty of malfeasance. She doesn't want to answer to the fact that she's being investigated for the use of the state plane. She doesn't want to answer those questions. She has recently gone after me on things like taxes. I'm not going to raise your taxes. She's gone after me on taking away your guns. I'm not going to take away your guns. There are all kinds of things that our governor is saying that just aren't true. But she doesn't want to answer those questions, so she didn't come. But I'm so glad you did, and I'm so glad we can have this debate here tonight. Thank you.
We also drew for the order of the first question. That goes to Tracy Quint. Ms. Quint, this is your first campaign for public office. What experience makes you the best candidate to lead South Dakota's executive branch?
I think my experience as a normal young professional in the state of South Dakota gives me a good advantage for this office. Being able to know what South Dakotans go through, knowing that, you know, as a young professional, I work 2 jobs and I hold down two pieces of employment, and I understand the struggles that a South Dakotan goes through every day. And I see it on the street. I see it with the people that I work with one-on-one. And I know that, you know, people are just trying to get by, and I understand that. And I really hope that we can, I really feel that I can understand the people and what they're going through. And I really want to be able to express that and to be able to work with the individuals in South Dakota and say, I understand what you're going through. I'm one of you. I haven't been in the legislature for years. I haven't been a politician for years, and I don't have any corporations or anything in my back pocket, and I just want to work to make the state better for you.
Representative Smith, I'll give you 1 minute to speak to your experience.
You bet, and thank you. You know, over the past 6 years, I've been in the South Dakota legislature, but before that, I was a teacher and a coach. And through those processes, I learned leadership skills, actually throughout my entire lifetime. But as a legislator, then I was asked to be the leader 4 years ago of the House Minority Caucus. And in doing so, I've honed those leadership skills, and I've learned how to work together, work across the aisle to solve real South Dakota problems. And so that experience, along with the relationships that I built, set me up in a good spot to work together to solve real problems. Over the last years, we have had many things brought into our state that don't need to be here. And as the leader of the state of South Dakota, I will focus on real South Dakota problems and work together with my colleagues across the aisle to solve those issues.
Our second question goes to you, Representative Smith. Governor Noem has labeled you as, quote, too extreme for South Dakota. You have campaigned as a centrist, but as a Democrat, you are to the political left on many issues compared to many South Dakotans, since Republican registered voters hold a strong majority in the state. For example, you hold an F rating with the NRA. What would you say to Republicans who are hesitant to vote for any Democratic candidate, especially in the current political climate? 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd let them know that they should look at the latest quotes in the front page of the Argus Leader today from a friend of mine named Spencer Gosh. Spencer is the Speaker of the House, and he is a very conservative individual. He'll tell you, I'm not extreme. He will tell you. You know why he can say that? Because he knows me. He's worked with me over the past 6 years, and he knows how we work together to solve real problems here in the state of South Dakota. There's nothing extreme about that. My F rating with the NRA, I tell you what, there's nothing extreme about my views on that either. I'm not taking away your guns. I have voted to make sure that people that are mentally unstable don't have access to their gun. That's what they're talking about on that. I also thought that perhaps we shouldn't carry guns in the Capitol building. So those are things that I voted for that went along with law enforcement, by the way, because that's what law enforcement wanted as well. So I voted with law enforcement. And then I get a bad grade because I vote with law enforcement. That's very frustrating, okay? But let me tell you that I'm not extreme in any measure. I'm a moderate who works together with other people in South Dakota, it doesn't matter what party you're in, to solve real problems here in the state.
Tracy Quint, 60 seconds on how you would speak to Republican majority registered voters in South Dakota.
I would say that rather than looking at party lines, we need to look at individual issues and think about where your importance or where it's important to you, rather than voting straight down as a Republican candidate or as a Democrat or a registered Democrat or even just as a registered Libertarian. You need to look at where the individuals stand on the issues that are important to you. So I would say that being able to do that research and to be able to look at that individual and say, yes, I agree with them on these issues, but I really don't agree with them on these issues. I think we would get better people in office if we went by issue rather than by party lines.
Our next question goes to Representative Smith on something just unfolding tonight. Governor Kristi Noem is calling for an immediate investigation into what her campaign is calling alleged campaign finance violations from your campaign. According to state law, all contributions over $100 must include name, mailing address, city and state of each person making that contribution. Her campaign says your filings only include name and amount of the contribution. 90 seconds. What happened?
You know, we've done all the work we can do, and everything was at our accounting firm. If something was turned in and there was a clerical error or something like that done, I'm sure it's already been corrected, okay? There is nothing going on that is malfeasance or wrongdoing on the part of our campaign. We're up and up. We're palms up in everything that we do. We don't have ads that are running that are lies about the people that are running in the state. And so I would just say to the people of South Dakota to look at all the other things that have been said that are lies in this campaign already.
Tracy Quint, I'll give you 60 seconds. Did your campaign meet the filing deadline?
We did. We filed our paperwork just this afternoon, so we are in on time. We don't have the out-of-state or the amount of donations that the other two parties have, and that's just the reality of it. As a third party, sometimes you just don't get the funding that other parties get. But we are extremely proud of the campaign that we've run so far. We haven't run any attack ads on anybody, and we haven't had any indecencies going on in our campaign that I know of anyways. So we've run a really great campaign, and all of the money that we've gotten has been from individuals within the state of South Dakota, and we're really proud of that fact.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next topic of the evening, inflation. Representative Smith, this question for you. All three candidates for governor have expressed interest in cutting the sales tax on food. However, some lawmakers are expressing concerns over how to pay for it. One suggestion floated, removing it in steps over several years. Representative Smith, how would you implement your plan to cut the grocery tax, and how would the state make up for the lost revenue?
Well, it's a great question, and we've been advocating for a grocery tax elimination for years. For years and years and years. And now the governor decided that that's a great idea too. Well, she wasn't so keen on it in February, all right? And so what we're doing is working with the appropriations people to make sure that that cut can be done responsibly. And one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we have revenue streams such as cannabis coming in, which I believe will be voted on, that can offset that. And so we're looking at things like that to make sure we do that. We also have a $115 million surplus right now. $115 million surplus that would more than cover the money that we're talking about here with the grocery tax. And so that money could go back to the people and put it in their pocket. I was the only one that voted last year to get that tax removed. We passed it through the House of Representatives, and it died immediately when it hit the Senate because the governor told them to kill it.
Tracy Quint, 60 seconds. How would your administration implement a cut to groceries tax and make up for the lost revenue?
Well, I will agree with Representative Smith in the fact that this should have been done a long time ago, and I believe that we shouldn't be imparting more of a tax burden on individuals than we have to be, especially with essentials like food. That should have been eliminated a long time ago. As far as how do we fund that, there's other things that we can be doing. Like he said, legalizing cannabis and getting that revenue stream going here in South Dakota. Other things that we can also look at are criminal justice reform and housing less people in prisons, getting people that are not guilty of violent crime. And if we have less people that we're paying $29,000 a year to keep them in prison, get them out back into the economy and have them be working productive members of society, we're gonna bring more money back into our state, and we're going to be spending less warehousing people in prisons. And that's one of the other ways I think we can do that.
Our next question directed to Ms. Quint.
Yes.
Inflation is a global problem with a very local impact. Many South Dakotans are finding it hard to pay the bills as the cost of groceries and gas eats into their paychecks. What do you plan to do at a state level to ease the burden of inflation on the average South Dakotan, aside from the previously mentioned food tax proposal?
I believe there's other ways that we can eliminate some of the tax burden to the individuals, as far as reducing property taxes, reducing some of the other things that people are taxed on nowadays. We're at a 4.5% sales tax. We were supposed to have that drop back down to 4% with the internet sales and whatnot, and that still hasn't been done. And I think that's one of the things that we can take a look at in reducing that tax burden on the individuals. You know, I'm not looking to eliminate any programs that people are on, but I do think that we can take a look at if there's any government bloat or any money that's being wasted by the government, and being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, we can look at where we can reduce some of that amount of money, and make sure that the people are not paying more in taxes and not paying more than they have to be. We can definitely reduce some of that burden on the individual. And inflation's going to be hard, but if they're spending less money on taxes and paying less into the government, I think that'll help a lot of the families in South Dakota.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds.
New and better jobs in our state would be a great start, right? People earning more, being able to afford more, and so new and better jobs are something that we want to work with in the state and keeping people here. in the state by having those new and better jobs and keeping our students here. Now, to the point that you're talking about, though, when we talk about those, there's a lot of things that we've spent money on that we're calling the Christie tax. All right, and we could eliminate the Christie tax right now. We didn't need a fence. We didn't need a news studio. We didn't need to spend our dollars promoting the state, but really promoting ourselves, the governor. There were a lot of things that our governor has spent money on that didn't need to spend money on, and that money could go back to the people as well.
We'll move on to our next topic of the evening, and that is abortion. This next question for Ms. Quint. Many candidates running for state Senate and House have told us that they're pro-choice. They also say they're ready to have nuanced conversations about abortion legalization should voters send them to peer. If voters elect you as governor, what legislation would your office want introduced regarding abortion?
If elected as governor, I would want abortion removed from the legal sense whatsoever. It's a medical decision that I believe needs to be taken between an individual and their doctor and possibly their family if that's what they decide. I don't believe that the government has any room to be deciding what an individual can do with themselves and with their families, especially if it's a medical issue. They shouldn't have to jump through hoops to have a procedure that could save their lives. And I think that's where the government should remove itself completely from the abortion issue. I think that's a medical decision, and we should leave that up to the medical providers and the individuals who are seeking that procedure.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds.
You know, Ms. Quint and I agree on this issue that this should be left up to individuals and doctors to make these important decisions for women's health. We've gone too far. And we had an opportunity. We could have called the special session and done something about it. We actually brought legislation that would have tried to remove rape and incest from this list. And I think we had the political will to do that, but we didn't do it. We didn't get that special session called by the governor in order to do that. So we proposed legislation that will bring that. I think the other part of it's going to have to be brought through referendum, though, in the state. And you know that they're already working on something, but we're going to have to do that through a referendum to get that through to protect women's health in the state of South Dakota. We've gone too far, and the governor supports how far we've gone. You know, the governor on TV said that it's okay for a 10-year-old to have to give birth to a baby that was raped. That's not right.
Our next topic of the evening is agriculture. This question directed to Representative Smith. Agriculture has long been the #1 industry in South Dakota, but the industry is changing. The number of family farms in the state has fallen from nearly 40,000 in 1980 to around 29,000 today. This is resulting in population declines in many rural communities as well. What can be done to revitalize small and mid-sized farms in South Dakota? 90 seconds.
It's a great question, and I look forward to working with the farmers in the state of South Dakota on this very issue. Met recently with Farmers Union and had a great conversation with an ag producer up in the northern part of South Dakota that's opened his own oat business, oatmeal. He has decided to start something new right here in South Dakota, and he, rather than growing the traditional corn and soybeans that a lot of folks are doing, he's diversified into oats. And he started an oatmeal business. And one of the reasons why is his kids can now work for that same company here in the state of South Dakota. So more people are able to stay in South Dakota and work on the farms. We need more innovation like this in the state of South Dakota. I don't want our grains and crops leaving the state of South Dakota as fast as they are without turning into something else here in the state of South Dakota. We also met with the ethanol industry. I'm all for E30 in our state fleet. The governor had said she would, but then she didn't follow through. E30 is a way to make sure that our ethanol is used in our vehicles, and it provides for cleaner air. So there are things that we can do in our state to make sure we grow that industry. The other thing I'd want to do is look at an opportunity to have an office for developing co-ops, farmer co-ops here in the state of South Dakota, like some of the states around us are doing, to grow these business ideas that diversify ag and make it possible for more of our people to stay in their smaller communities and do the great things that so many farmers are choosing to do.
Tracy Quint, 60 seconds.
Yep, I agree that we need to have farmers and ranchers at the table when we're discussing agricultural legislation. I'm not a farmer, I'm not a rancher. I don't know the struggles that they go through every day. I don't know exactly how, the logistics of running a farm, but I would want to work with the individuals to make sure that, the policies and the things that are set in place help them and help them to continue to be stronger as, as farmers, and when they're producing their products. I've talked to a couple of ranchers and farmers that talked about country of origin labeling, working to deal with energy costs as far as ag inflation goes. How do we reduce those so that they can keep producing their crops and still be able to make money off of them? And we could do some things with rolling back certain legislation or certain regulations as far as having the ability to haul their own products without a CDL so that they can stay competitive with the larger farms.
Representative Smith, was there anything in there you'd like to respond to? Next question directed toward Ms. Quint. Drought has hit a few areas of the state hard this year, particularly in the Yankton area, where the severity of the drought is hitting historic levels. What would you do to help farmers endure the environmental extremes we so often face in South Dakota? 90 seconds.
I think with something like that, I would want to sit down and talk to them and say, what would help you? What would be the best avenue? Like I said, I don't know what the logistics of running that farm would be, and I don't know exactly what would be the best route to help them and to be able to make sure that they're still viable in the years to come when maybe the drought isn't as bad, and how do we keep their farmland viable and whatnot. I would definitely be open to having a sit-down conversation and saying, what can we do as a state to make sure that your land is still viable? What can we do to make sure that next year, when we do have enough rain and the drought isn't bad, that you're still able to grow on this land, and we're able to produce the crops that we need to feed South Dakota.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds.
As we've traveled across the state, it is interesting how spotty the state is this year. There are good prices for our crops this year, but there are areas like you're talking about where early on it became clear that there wasn't going to be a crop. And I think as a state, we need to work with those individual counties in those areas with declarations of an emergency declaration, to help them in those rights. But we got to also make sure that people are utilizing the insurance programs that we have out there for crop insurance. And we have to also then, work to, again, diversify what they're doing and have other streams of income for these farmers. I feel for them, and I do agree with Ms. Quint that we need to sit down with the ag producers. When we make decisions about ag, we should be doing it with people that are in ag. And that's why I want to make sure we bring back a Department of Ag and have an ag secretary and a secretary of natural resources. They're separate things. We want to have a secretary for ag to help us make these very decisions that we're speaking of today.
Our next topic of the night is Native American affairs. The first question goes to Representative Smith. Indigenous people make up more than half of the cases listed on the state's missing persons clearinghouse site. Last year, the legislature created the Liaison for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons within the Attorney General's office. That position, as you know, is intended to serve as a bridge between tribal and state jurisdictions. This year, the nonprofit Native Hope pledged 3 years of funding for this position. As governor, would you support permanent state funding for this position?
First of all, the answer is absolutely. And I want to let you know how hard Representative Poirier worked on that, Representative Red Dawn Foster, friends of mine, working so hard to make sure that these laws passed. And not only are they going to fund one position this year, but I believe there may be up to 3 people working on this coming up. And it is a huge problem. And we need to do a better job. And one of the things that we're going to be able to do with this new position is have different governments, the tribal government, the state government, and the national government can talk together. So we can do a better job of identifying who's missing and then work to find those individuals. It's not right. It's not right what has gone on for so long. And as I travel through these areas of our state and working with people, they are so proud of the work their legislators have done. And we supported them through that process and got those bills passed, but that's not enough. We need to make sure we provide the funding going forward, and we need to keep it on the forefront of people's minds, because otherwise these people will be forgotten, and that's not okay.
Ms. Quint, 60 seconds. Would you support permanent funding, and what else might your administration suggest as it relates to missing and murdered Indigenous people? 60 seconds.
I will agree with Representative Smith that we need to have everybody at the table and discussing, how do we make sure that this issue doesn't get worse, and how do we eliminate this issue? We need to have the tribal leaders involved. We need to have national leaders involved. We need to have the state leaders involved in making sure that we can, keep these individuals from going missing, and then find these individuals if they are missing, and bring their kidnappers, attackers, whatever, to justice. And definitely looking at what funding sources we can make sure that continues to be viable even after this. It's a grant, right? Or nonprofit, yeah. So even after that funding runs out, let's look at how we can continue to keep that position going.
We'll move on to questions related to election integrity. This question directed towards Representative Smith. The Washington Post placed Governor Kristi Noem on a list of candidates who have denied or questioned the results of the 2020 presidential election. Noem has said she believes Joe Biden is the President of the United States. She also campaigned in Arizona for a candidate known for baseless election fraud claims. How has the dialogue around election integrity impacted our confidence in the upcoming election? 90 seconds.
January 6th was a terrible day for our country. Terrible day for our country. Election denying is absolutely not the answer. We know how hard our state auditors work to make sure that we have a fair and free election in the state of South Dakota. They're good people, and they're working hard. Now, I had a lot of people asking us for forensic audits of this election. Trump won by 70% in South Dakota. I said on the floor of the House, if anybody thinks that something was wrong in this election, it should be me. I have 8 people in my caucus, is what the quote was. And I think it was fair, right? South Dakotans work hard. Our auditors work hard to make sure that we're moving forward and that they're doing a good job. This is all rhetoric to stir up people and to deny the real winners in this case the chance to have those offices and to put doubt in people's minds. And that's not good for our democracy. That's not good for our country. And you're right. The governor has gone out and stumped for people that are election deniers. And that's very, very frustrating. South Dakotans deserve better.
Tracy Quint, 60 seconds. How has the dialogue around election integrity impacted our confidence in the upcoming election?
I think that, once we have a winner decided, we need to accept that and move on. And whether you believe it or not, that's the way it is. I do think that as South Dakotans, I think our elections, we work hard to make sure that it is fair and the election day runs smoothly. I mean, I would say that maybe coming up to the elections, the coverage of all the candidates isn't always fair, but that's just coming from a third-party candidate myself. But I would definitely say, as far as election day, I don't think that there's any seediness or anything going on underneath the surface. No.
Our next topic of state issues question directed to Ms. Quint. State government has come under scrutiny recently on a number of transparency issues. One example, Governor Kristi Noem has faced questions for her use of the state airplane. She denies any wrongdoing. If elected, what will you do to make government more open, both within the governor's office and statewide?
Well, if I'm elected as governor, I would make sure that the people have as much information about what's going on in Pierre as they possibly can. I want to open up the office for media interviews as far as, excuse me, as far as we possibly can, within reason. I'm not, during personal family times or anything, but I want to make my office open to media, and I want to make other offices within Pierre open to media. I want the people to know what's going on, and I want them to know that we're being good stewards of the tax dollars that they have coming in and to the policies that we're putting in place, because we are doing it for the people of South Dakota. The only reason that the people elected in Pierre are there is because the people of South Dakota put them there. And I think that they need to remember that when they're there, that it's their duty to be a representative of the people that elected them. So I want to make sure that it's as transparent as it possibly can.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds.
Thank you. And transparency is huge. and showing people what you do. It took forever to try to figure out where this airplane has gone. And we finally figured that out by pushing and pushing and pushing. And in the records, there are questions, right? So many questions that actually the GOAC decided that this should be looked at, and it was sent over to the Attorney General, but the Attorney General sent it to the Hughes County State's Attorney to investigate. So it's being investigated right now. And this law was put on the books to make sure things like this didn't happen. And as the governor of South Dakota, I will completely understand that that airplane is not mine. That airplane works for the people of South Dakota. All right, and so that will be very clear from day one, that the airplane, if it goes out, will go out to do the business of the state of South Dakota.
The next question is for Ms. Quint. Several major projects in South Dakota are raising questions about where to draw the line between the rights of individuals and businesses. A proposed CO2 pipeline is pitting landowners against ethanol producers, while a group of Sioux Falls residents launched a ballot initiative drive to stop a proposed meatpacking plant from being built in the city. As governor, how will you balance the rights of citizens with business freedoms?
Well, first of all, as governor, I will 100% support the rights of the landowners and the individuals. If they own the land, I do not support, the use of eminent domain. If it's something that a company wants to put a pipeline through or wants to utilize a person's land for something, they need to buy it off that individual fair and square if that's what they're looking to do. And if they don't want to sell, then the company needs to figure out how they're going to do that without using that person's land. As far as things like the slaughterhouse and whatnot, I guess right now it's on the ballot, or they're trying to stop it as, an initiative. And I do think that people have a little bit of rights as far as, their community and whatnot. I don't know if I necessarily agree with stopping a business unless it's directly affecting an individual's health or land, which, I guess it could be argued that this one is, but for sure, I would definitely not support the use of eminent domain.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds on balancing the rights of citizens with business freedoms.
You know what? We do not use eminent domain for private gain. That's summing it up as succinctly as I can. We do not use eminent domain for private gain, especially on a person's private land, right? They have the right to use that land as they see fit, and we will not do that. The other thing is supporting the will of the people. So as far as the other talking point that you talked about, the will of the people will prevail in this case, and we'll have a decision, and we will follow through with that. I really support the will of the people. And I think that when the people vote on something, we should follow what they say.
Our next topic relates to the ongoing drug crisis in our state and nation. This question for Representative Smith. While South Dakota has a lower rate of overdose deaths than many other states, the impact of the drug crisis is still very much being felt in communities around the state. What would you do at a state level to combat drug and opioid abuse?
The first thing I want to talk about here is how we deal with people that are addicted to a drug. First of all, I want to change the paradigm that addiction is not a moral failing. I'll say it again. Addiction is not a moral failing. It's an illness, and it should be treated as such. So we need to do a shift between corrections and treatment. So people that are addicted to some of these drugs, like opioids and like meth, it's a big problem in the state of South Dakota, need time away from the drug. And that takes sometimes being incarcerated or put in treatment that's a lockdown facility so they don't have access to that. But just locking people up for it doesn't do any good. We need the treatment aspect. So we need to work on that. We need to figure that out. And I know oftentimes we try, but we don't keep people long enough perhaps to actually get the actual treatment that they need, or there's not space available to treat the people that need the treatment. I was just talking to a woman on Saturday night, and she said, "Thank you so much for realizing that it is not a moral failing," and she started crying because she herself was a person that has addicted to drugs. She's 2 years sober, but she says it's so hard each and every day, and to have people think that she's a bad person because she got addicted to a drug that was prescribed by a doctor, and then later sought cheaper options that were illegal drugs, breaks her heart, and she wants a change. And as a South Dakota, we need to focus on that change.
Tracy Quint, 60 seconds. What would you do at a state level to combat the drug crisis?
I'm going to agree with a lot of what Representative Smith said. I believe that we should be concentrating more on rehabilitation than incarceration. As if an individual is caught with an illegal drug, most likely they're going to end up with a felony on their record, they're going to end up incarcerated for a period of time, and then when they get out of prison, it's going to be harder for them to find work because of that felony on their record. It's going to be harder for them to become a productive member of society once they're released from prison. So I think what we need to do is concentrate more on the rehabilitation and concentrate more on decriminalizing more of the victimless crimes so that people can be rehabilitated afterwards and can become productive members of society and can contribute to the economy of the state once they are rehabilitated.
Our next question is an audience-submitted question along these same lines. Or did you have a response?
I just want to say that what she said is so true. That the housing and the jobs portion of what you talked about, when you have to check that I'm a felon, it doesn't provide for an opportunity to grow your life and do better, right? And so they get stuck in a cycle. And that's what we need to break. And by doing exactly what you were talking about, that's how we can do that as a state. So we agree on that. And that's something we can do so much better than we're doing today. So I'm sorry to jump in there. I'm passionate about that.
Right. This next question, audience submitted along similar lines. Police, sheriff's offices, the highway patrol are among the first lines in the fight against drugs. They also frequently report that many violent crimes are connected to drug-related issues. What will you do to support the work of law enforcement officers in the state? And I think I direct that to Representative Smith.
First of all, our law enforcement officers in the state of South Dakota are fabulous, all right? They work so hard to protect and serve the communities that they work in. And my hat's off to them because they put themselves in dangerous situations each and every day. And so I want to say thank you to those people. Thank you, law enforcement. Now, that situation that they're put into often is mental health crises, that they're not a mental health professional. So we have to work on that. I know that we've had the opportunity to put in iPads, for example, or computers in the cars that link up with mental health services across our state so that they can help evaluate people that are in mental health crises. But that doesn't take away that immediate threat when somebody's in that crisis with firearms or things like that involved. And so what we need to do is solve that mental health problem before it becomes acute, all right? And that takes more help than we have currently in the state of South Dakota. We need more counselors, we need more people treating people with mental illness and the like, so people don't get to a point where they're in that crisis that they're dangerous to themselves or others. And so that again is another point that we can do better at. You know, oftentimes these same people that are struggling with mental health issues medicate themselves with drugs, all right? So if we can break that cycle again, we can do better for the people of the state of South Dakota.
Ms. Quint, 60 seconds.
I will agree that we need more mental health services all around the states, but also I think that we need to make sure that we're continuing to support our law enforcement and our first responders and making sure that their mental health services are also as strong as they possibly can be, so that if they do end up in a situation that's scary like that, or if they do end up in a situation where it's not necessarily in their purview, it's a mental health issue, not necessarily a crime issue, that they have at least some of the training to be able to say, I can de-escalate the situation, and then afterwards they have somebody to go to just talk about the situation and to regroup and to be able to know that they're supported even in that situation, because it affects their mental health as well, and we need to support them before and after the situations happened.
Our next topic, we'll move on to economy and jobs. This question for Representative Smith. South Dakota boasts one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. And while that's a positive sign for the economy, it's also indicative of one of the biggest issues stalling growth in our state, a lack of workforce. According to the Department of Labor, there are 25,000 job openings in the state, but only about 11,000 unemployed people. What will you do to attract more people to the state and spur workforce development?
Great question. First thing is we need to make sure we have jobs in the state that people are trained for, right? And we're losing some of our educated people because the states around us are paying more. And so they're heading out of state. It's called brain drain. We need to stop the brain drain. Secondly, on the same issue, we used to be a state that had lots of immigrants and lots of refugees brought in by places like Catholic Social Services, Lutheran Social Services, and we were a center for people coming to America. And these people work so hard, and they bring great things to our communities, and they also provide workers. And under the current governor, we have said no to multiple groups of people that we could have had in our communities, adding to the diversity and the greatness of our state, and also providing workers into our economy. But we haven't done that. We need to do that. We need to make sure that we are welcoming people into the state of South Dakota that want to work. And so as the state of South Dakota, we need to do that. We need to bring workers here, show them that there are good jobs. The other thing that we can do to do a better job here too is through our training programs. I just got to visit a carpentry program for journeymen, and they are teaching people the trades right here in the state of South Dakota. And these folks are coming here and then working in the construction trades, the electricians and things like that. That's so vital to our economy in the state.
Ms. Quint, 60 seconds. What will you do to attract more people to the state and spur workforce development?
I'm also going to agree on the immigration and refugees. We need to start working on good, smart immigration policies and looking at what we can do as far as allowing for work visas and allowing for refugees that want to come here and they want to get jobs. They want to contribute to the economy of the state. I think that's super important. Is not only to create a more diverse community, because I think that's something that Sioux Falls has always been really proud of, is the diversity here. But also we really, we need workers, and a lot of people will come to this country because they're willing to learn a new trade, they're willing to learn a new skill. So we need to concentrate on that. Our current administration has been opposed to allowing refugees in, and I really feel like that's a huge mistake for the state of South Dakota. We need workers to come in. We need to fill those jobs because we do have a lot of them that are empty. But yeah, I think that immigration and allowing refugees is a big part of that.
Our next topic is education. This question for Ms. Quint. While there have been recent legislative efforts to improve teacher pay in South Dakota, the state remains close to the bottom in this field nationwide. We lag behind neighboring states, making it harder to retain teachers. If you're elected, what will you do to improve teacher pay in South Dakota? 90 seconds.
Well, I think one of the things that we need to really look at as far as teacher pay is also, what kind of schools are we allowing in South Dakota, like school choice. We really kind of concentrate on the issues of public schools themselves, but I really think that if we allowed for more choice in education, allowing for kids to choose, different types of schooling, because not all kids learn the same way, not all kids are able to thrive in a public school environment. If we allowed, the tax dollars to follow the children to whatever kind of school they learn best in, I think more teachers would stay in the state of South Dakota because they would have that option to teach in a different school, but they were still getting funded for that child as they're going through that school system. We should be funding students, not systems. So I think that's a big thing, allowing for more open enrollment, allowing for more private schools, religious or otherwise, to be able to decrease the size of classes and allow children to learn the best way that they know how.
Representative Smith.
Well, education is a passion of mine as a former teacher and a coach, and my wife is a teacher. I come from a background of my whole family, they're educators. And so when you talk about education, it's the backbone for our entire state. And the first thing we need to start with our teachers is respect. We need to show the profession of education the respect it deserves. And right now we have a governor that doesn't do that. She goes out of her way, goes out of the state to find our social studies standards and says it's not political, but yet it is. We need to trust our teachers to teach. We need to trust our school boards to be school boards. That's where it starts. Now, as a state, we need to fund that education, right? And we are towards the bottom again, and that's partly because of the way the formula is written, all right? Because when we do that, So we're going to need to always constantly look at that to make sure that we're providing education. My recommendation is that we start with our education budget first, because our kids are so important, and that's our future as a state.
We'll move on to health care. This question for Representative Smith. Last week, while discussing the long-term care crisis, you said part of the solution was for voters to expand Medicaid. However, expanding Medicaid eligibility does not directly impact the state's reimbursement rate for Medicaid. South Dakota has one of the lowest Medicaid reimbursement rates in the region, which is causing many long-term care facilities to lose more than $50 a day for each Medicaid pay resident. As governor, would you also support raising the Medicaid reimbursement rate? 90 seconds.
It's a very complex issue. And yes, we need to raise the reimbursement rate. When you lose $50 a day on every patient that you're taking care of, you can't do that. You can't do it very long. The way that our Medicaid expansion is going to help, and it's a short-term perhaps fix, but many of our long-term care facilities in smaller communities are being propped up by the hospitals that serve those communities right now. So those hospitals, in being able to be more profitable or solvent, are able then to still offer the long-term care. So that's what we're talking about there. Now, the process, as we know, day one, my lieutenant governor will be heading up a task force to make sure that we address this crisis. We've been talking about this for a very long time. As long as I've been in the legislature, this has been a crisis. And we keep getting, close, and we give it a little bit more and a little bit more, but we aren't to a point where we've stabilized it. And the cool thing the other day was Flandreau actually opened a new care facility. They were very creative on their reservation, and it is an amazing place to care for people. I wish all of our communities could have that same joy that they had that day, but that's not a reality right now. It's something we need to work for, and we need to work together across the aisle to make sure that that happens.
Ms. Quint, 60 seconds.
Well, as I guess I would say that I'm not 100% in favor of the Medicaid expansion, and any of my followers kind of know that. But I think there are other ways that we can look at increasing the medical funding within the state of South Dakota. He brought up the nursing home that the Flandreau tribe just opened, and part of the funding from that came from the medical marijuana income. Expanding recreational marijuana throughout the state of South Dakota. We could help fund some of the Medicaid expansion through something like that. That would bring a lot more funding through to the state of South Dakota. We don't want to be the last in line to do something with, cannabis legislation, because if we're the last ones, nobody's going to flock to us. Nobody's going to come in and want to spend money with us. So we want to make sure that we're ahead of at least some of the curve. So we need to work on getting that recreational legalized as soon as possible.
The next question is for Ms. Quint. Long-term care isn't the only healthcare sector facing staffing issues in the state. People in rural areas face more challenges when it comes to accessing healthcare, and it's only gotten worse as rural facilities struggle to hire enough doctors and nurses. What would you do to improve rural healthcare in South Dakota? 90 seconds.
I think one of the things that we can do to improve rural healthcare in South Dakota, we actually did it partially during COVID, was we expanded telehealth, and we took away some of the barriers for people to be able to access health through telehealth. Especially in a rural area, it might be hard to get to a hospital. It might be hard to hire doctors and nurses. But if we can have, a smaller staff, but still be able to access the bigger hospitals through telehealth, through video calls, through being able to still have that access from the bigger metro areas, I think that's going to be a big help in making sure that the healthcare that the rural areas see is still good quality healthcare, and it's not just abandoned and they don't end up without in a healthcare desert, basically. So I would say that expanding the ability to virtually meet with doctors and nurses in the bigger cities is one of the ways that we can help increase the quality of healthcare in rural areas.
Representative Smith, 60 seconds.
Have no doubt that Medicaid expansion will help. It'll help a lot. We've left billions of dollars out of the economy here in the state of South Dakota because we haven't expanded Medicaid. And there are thousands of South Dakotans that don't have access to primary care, and many of them in rural areas. So that right there would allow payment for people's services, because ultimately people get sick and ultimately they go get care, but they get the most expensive care you can get at an emergency room, for example. It's not good for any of us, and these hospitals have bad debt that they have to write down then. So Medicaid expansion is a part of it. We also have great programs that we need to keep going that provide doctors for rural communities through scholarship opportunities and through payment of loans, student loans, for those people that serve out their time in these rural communities. And I would be in favor of looking at those programs, seeing how they're working, and when possible, making sure that we continue to do things like that in these communities.
Our next topic is Veterans Affairs. This question directed to Representative Smith. Earlier this evening, Governor Kristi Noem hosted a free dinner for veterans and their families here in Sioux Falls. If elected governor, there are at least two pressing concerns for state veterans. One is continued work on the state veterans cemetery. The second is the lack of resources veterans face when filing claims for federal compensation and benefits. Would you support adding more veteran services officers to the State Veterans Affairs Department? 90 seconds.
First of all, our veterans are so important, and I respect them. My father was a veteran, my grandfathers both World War II veterans, and so thank you. Thank you to those of you that served, and that served so honorably in our country. Now, when it comes to providing services for these people, the Veterans Cemetery, by the way, was a bill that was it was a great bill for South Dakota, and it was great to see how people came together to support that bill. But we need to finish the job that we start, right? And so that's something we need to do. Another thing I'm advocating for, though, is an east side, somewhere on the east side of our state, a long-term care facility for our veterans. Veterans, right now, Hot Springs is where we have that long-term care facility. And they need the support there. And yes, we need people to do those jobs that you're talking about. We need to make access points for our veterans as streamlined as possible, so they can get the services they need, because they ultimately they deserve these things because of what they've done for our country and what they've done for us and for our freedom. As far as the fundraiser tonight, that's great. I just wish the governor was here so she could debate. You can do both. You can support our veterans and debate.
Ms. Quint, 60 seconds. Would you support adding more veteran services officers to the State Veterans Affairs Department?
First of all, I would like to say that I 100% support the veterans of the state of South Dakota and of our great nation. I'm the child of a veteran, and I understand the struggles that military families go through, being far away from their distant families and whatnot. So I would 100% would support the ability to have more supports across the state so that those veterans can get the services that they need and that they deserve, because they did sacrifice time with their families. They did sacrifice some of their mental health to be able to go and protect our country. And I think that we need to support them because of the sacrifices that they made for us. So we should be supportive of them.
That was our closing question of the evening. We also drew order for closing statements. That goes to Tracy Quint. 2 minutes for your closing statement, starting now.
Again, I would like to thank South Dakota Public Broadcasting for having me here tonight. And I want to thank the voters of South Dakota for allowing me to be a part of this election. And I want to thank Representative Smith for being here tonight and for the opportunity to have this discussion tonight. As a South Dakota voter, I felt it was important for me to be a part of this election, and I'm honored and thrilled to be a part of this and to be able to be here and expressing my views and to be representing my party. I would also encourage everybody to go out and express their views on Election Day. Go out and vote. Go out and do your civic duty and make sure that your voice is heard on Election Day. Everybody has that right, and I think that everybody needs to take that opportunity to show that they want to be involved in the decisions that their state and that their country has. And if you really feel strongly about a candidate, if you really feel strongly about an issue, please don't be complacent. Don't just say, well, it's going to pass anyway, or they're going to get elected anyway, or they're not going to get elected anyway, it's not going to fail anyway, because you don't know that. You don't know until Election Day happens, and if too many people are complacent, then it's not going to go the way that you want it to. So I would just encourage you to get out there and make sure that your voice is heard on Election Day. And I'm very proud to be here, and I want to thank you all again for allowing me to be.
Representative Smith, 2-minute closing statement starts now.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. It's been an honor debating you again today, and you're right, the people deserve this discussion that we had here today, and it didn't hurt either one of us. We were here, and we let South Dakotans know more about who we are, and that's what it's about. Thank you to South Dakota Public Broadcasting for making this an important part of what South Dakota is, informing people about their votes. That is so important as well, as a service to the state of South Dakota and to you, the voter. But I want to speak to you, the voter, and I want to tell you that it has been an extreme honor to be able to travel across the state of South Dakota. People have let me into their homes and into their businesses to show me how proud they are of where they're from, but they've also showed me the challenges that face them. As the governor of South Dakota, I want to work alongside you to make sure that South Dakota is a better state. And I can promise you that I will focus on you. I will focus on the state of South Dakota. I will serve all 4 years of my term when elected, and I want to work as hard as anybody's ever worked to make sure that becomes a reality. This is a close race, and voter turnout will decide this race. Don't be apathetic about voting. Get out and vote. Get out and vote. No matter who you're going to vote for, do your duty and vote. Thank you again, South Dakota Public. Thank you. It's been a great night, and thanks for tuning in tonight.
That concludes our 2022 gubernatorial debate, and I want to say thank you again to our candidates. You can listen to a rebroadcast of this debate on tomorrow's In the Moment. That's at noon Central, 11 Mountain, and again at 7 Central, 6 Mountain on SDPB Radio. This Thursday at 8 Central, a special hour-long South Dakota Focus reviews the 2 statewide ballot initiatives and introduces you to the candidates for Secretary of State and Public Utilities Commission. And on Friday, November 4th at 8 p.m. Central, SDPB and Dakota News Now partnered to host the U.S. Senate debate. Republican incumbent John Thune faces 2 challengers, Democrat Brian Bangs and Libertarian Tamara Lesner. On behalf of all of us at SDPB, thank you for watching. Good night.
In collaboration with the Associated Press, investigating evidence of Putin's war crimes
We were starting to see videos showing a lot of civilian deaths.
and the pursuit of justice.
This project is not just about documenting the suffering, it's about understanding what you do with that suffering.
Tuesday at 9, 8 Mountain on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
An invasive predator ravaging ecosystems.
We didn't have lionfish 10, 15 years ago.
Can their devastating takeover be stopped?
Nice for you.
Ocean invaders